And now virtually is Lucy Ndungu. She is the Regional Manager for East and Southern Africa, United Nations Volunteers Program. Lucy, thank you so much for your time. Let's have a little chat about volunteering and just some of the misconceptions that come around it. You know, many times we think it's mainly young people who are waiting for a job or waiting for school to kind of open up. But it's far more than that, or, you know, at times it's during a time of crisis that we see volunteers come up. How would you describe it? And especially, you know, here in Kenya and in the region, what kind of impact does it have?
Thank you very much for having me, Victoria. Good evening. First, to try and address the misconceptions that may arise with regard to volunteerism. Volunteerism first is a social behavior. So it's a value system. It's not an activity that is restricted to age. So, and those values are the ones that were inculcated in us when we were growing up. So that is what actually drives people to volunteer. And I have a UN volunteer, 75-year-old James Hadu, who volunteers with the UN assistance mission in Somalia. So essentially it's because of those values of Ubuntu, those values of Ubuntu Bulamu, as Ugandans call it. I just came from Uganda where I completed my assignments. But those values that are innate in us as human beings. The second point I want to make to dispel this misconception about volunteerism is that volunteers actually make important contributions throughout the development spectrum. So it's not just during the times of crisis that you see volunteers, but essentially you will see volunteers in the sectors of health, you'll see them in education, you'll see them in peace and development, especially in conflict-affected areas, you'll see them supporting maternal health. So in the entire spectrum of development, you're going to see volunteers. The third point that I would like to make, Victoria, is that volunteerism, again, is not a stopgap measure to work placement or to furthering your education. Essentially, it does not replace job creation also by the national government, but what volunteerism does is actually it bridges that gap in service delivery. For instance, if you look at areas that are affected, either you have refugee settlement schemes, and I mentioned I just came from Uganda. For instance, the largest refugee settlement in Uganda, Changwali, you find volunteers there who have helped the refugees access water and sanitation services. So essentially, volunteers also reach those areas that sometimes are hard to reach. The last thing that I wanted to mention, and you give statistics, Victoria, when you were giving the story about the very good work that is being done in Kibera, is that volunteerism also contributes to the GDP. So when you look at the number of hours that people are contributing, the resources that they actually, you know, contributing towards helping people who are more vulnerable than they are, people who are more in greater need, supporting countries also, whether it's in healthcare, in education. When you constitute that and you crunch the numbers, you realize that this is a very large contribution to the economy. And you've mentioned the study that was done in Kenya in 2017 that showed that the hours that had been contributed essentially ended up giving to about 3.6 of the GDP of Kenya that year.
Absolutely. And when you put numbers behind it, you do see that this is a serious contribution. Let's talk about the theme for this year, Together We Can Through Volunteering. What's the significance behind it?
This year, it has been a very, very difficult year for many people, and in very, very many regards, not least of which the COVID-19 pandemic. So the theme of this year's celebration is actually to thank the volunteers and also highlight the work that they have been doing amidst very, very difficult circumstances, to call upon everybody, all the actors, whether it's government, the volunteer involving organizations, academia, to increase their support and care to volunteers. The third thing was to reinvigorate volunteerism and to encourage governments and to support volunteers and also recognize their contributions. So the theme is actually first to thank the volunteers before anything else. And I would like to urge everyone who's listening that there are different ways that we have given actually to thank the volunteers who've been helping this year. For instance, instance, you can go and you record a video and you thank the volunteers. You can post it on your social media page with the hashtag Together We Can. You can also post a thank you message to volunteers on your social media using the Give a Heart hashtag. You can also take a photo with your mask on with the emoji of a blue heart, and you post that with the hashtag Heart Your Mask. So those are various ways that you can thank volunteers. When you look at, for instance, the way volunteers this year have supported the national health infrastructure, we have 50 volunteers in Kenya who are working with the government of Kenya in response to COVID. Volunteers such as Cynthia Wadamba, who's helping county governments in their response to COVID-19 pandemic. And I think you've also seen the videos of this Ann Bahati, who is a nurse at Kenyatta National Hospital. Yeah. And she has been very, very vocal about the work that volunteers do, sometimes at great risk to themselves. But they go out, they give their time, they give their resources, all in a bid to ensure that the service delivery is actually bolstered. So that is why this year we are thanking the volunteers, and we are saying that together we can come out of this pandemic, we can recover better, and we can build back better.
Well, it certainly is a selfless undertaking. Lucy, thank you so much for your time, and hopefully it inspires others to consider giving their time and their skills, especially during this season of giving. Thank you once again. On that note, let's take a short break here on Citizen
Thank you, Victoria.
Weekend. Much more ahead, including sports. Take a look.